Okay, on the podcast, my political panel wraps the week in politics, and Stu Nash, former Labour MP, says dump Nicola Willis as the finance minister. An incredible cool ballsy stuff from Stu Nash. And Shane Jones calls out the hypocrites who want to ban coal but continue to allow more than 1 billion tonnes a year to be imported into the country so we can keep the lights on. We'll show this hypocrisy and all its madness. Let's go.
Are we paying these people to front up, or are we paying them to fly to Wellington to eat their lunch? Should you really lose your career for refusing to take part in a 90-minute lesson about Māori culture? This government doesn't actually have any idea how to get economic growth. Show us what you made of, Prime Minister.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan, Garner.
Okay, welcome to the podcast. I'm Duncan, Garner. Please subscribe. Helps us stay around. And welcome Stu Nash and Ashley Church shortly on my panel. But Stu Nash is calling for the removal of the Finance Minister, Nicola Willis. He says she's not up to it. Hasn't shown enough and must go. And the Reserve Bank gives Luxton's government a reprieve. We'll talk about that with the panel. And Shane Jones calls out the left for its hypocrisy on coal. I've discovered Labour in their last 2 years in office imported close on 3 million tonnes of coal to keep the lights on. So let's go.
It's the Slam Dunk.
Okay, Shane Jones is unpopular with the Green movement. There's no doubt about that. And with those who want to close down mining. He simply doesn't care. And he's made it his job to push mining, push industry, and push the coal industry. Coal is a dirty word amongst the opposition, and it's been demonised. But Jones says it's a joke that we won't dig our own coal, but we'll import it from Indonesia instead. Last year, we imported 240,000 tonnes of the stuff. Under Labour, across their last 2 years in office, we imported 3 million tonnes of Indonesian coal. Isn't it just outrageous hypocrisy from the left? We used to export the stuff, now we import it to keep the lights on, and we leave our much better grade coal in the ground. It's hypocrisy at the highest levels, and Jones has had enough.
I'm reminded, sir, of the famous song from the States about Old Man River, because I find myself on behalf of Kiwi industry, manufacturing, garden variety people seeking to claw their way out of struggler's gully imposed upon them by the last failed regime. So I adapted the chords, I've adapted the lyrics. And I am known as Old King Coal because that's Matua's role. There will be no energy resilience. There will be no electricity security without ongoing access to gas and coal. It is absurd. We bring from 10,000 kilometres away in an area that could easily suffer major geopolitical uncertainty in Southeast Asia, whilst we have coal in strategically important levels 10 kilometres away from the coal-fired power stations in the Waikato.
New Zealand First has long signalled its contempt for the Paris Accord, and Jones let rip this week, and it's becoming clearer leaving Paris is likely to be a New Zealand First policy at the next election.
Why are we left with this bizarre situation? It's because a bunch of shallow, juvenile, virtue-signalling captives of the Paris Accord thought it was a good idea to condemn Kiwi investors, encourage the Aussie-owned banks to demonise an industry that employs a host of garden-variety Kiwis. But no, we're not going to stand for that unless we do have a host of access points to generate more energy out of our own resources. We are condemning New Zealand to a greater level of vulnerability.
New Zealand has more than 16 billion tonnes of in-ground coal resources. Much of it we don't dig up. 80% of it is this lignite coal in the South Island. And I was in Invercargill this week, and all they want to do is dig it out, mine it. But the army of bureaucrats and red tape and protesters against it is preventing much of this action.
Now, on the question of these protesters, sadly they have left the human filth that they created in the coal cart. Sadly, they have stopped blighting the prospects of the men and women who earn an honest living out of working in the West Coast in the coal industry. They've come down out of coal cart, that rhymes with night cart. They've made their way onto the ground, into the waiting hands of the police, and hopefully they will be served with appropriate punitive messages from the police in the vein of a trespass order and eventually hauled off to court. But the key point is, Mr. Speaker, why is it that a tiny minority of self-appointed moral apostles believe they have a greater role than we do in this House to actually save the planet. They don't think about 300 or 400 jobs or the $27,000 each day that was incurred by that legitimate business. No, they're possessed of a higher supercilious level of appreciation of the future in their own eyes, that the rest of us should perish and face ridiculously high energy costs while they sit aloft, should I say sat, in a coal cart, blighting, undermining, hobbling the ability of that business to continue to generate overseas money and look after their workforce.
So where does Labor sit in all this? How does it expect to keep the lights on? Jones has no love for his former party.
They don't want coal. They don't want oil and gas. They never passed legislation to actually uphold and give a clear path for their great lake in the South Island, all full of gratuitous, virtue-signalling, vacuous rubbish. That's why we're facing the greatest energy crisis of my lifetime. That's why that side of the House is ruining sovereign risk, because they refuse to abide by common sense policies that will give Kiwis the resilience and the security, which in the absence of those two things, we're going to suffer a great deal of deindustrialisation. But wait, the fast track is about to be improved. That will enable us to fast track more resources, more minerals, hopefully more gas, and certainly more coal. Here checks out Matua King Coal.
Think what you like about Jones and the way he presents an argument, but the guy is the friend of industry in a parliament that seriously lacks friends of business. The entire opposition appears anti-progress and entirely suspicious of wealth creation and industries that extract things from the ground or sea. But you've got to earn your keep somewhere. There's no free lunch, right? You've got to earn your keep somewhere. And I'm yet to see the left tell us where the money will come from. The best thing about Jones, unlike most others, he does it without a computer and he does it without notes. Unlike the Greens and the Māori MPs who come armed to the hilt with prepared speeches. Jones is one of a kind in Parliament right now, in my view, and those in business and industry desperately need him to succeed for their own sake.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Okay, time for the panel now. It's Ashley Church and Stu Nash. Always good to have them on. Gents, g'day. Welcome to the podcast.
See you too.
Ashley, I'll kick it off with you. Our Reserve Bank this week has cut interest rates, or cut OCR by 0.25. I wonder if they should have gone further. Some people say they should have gone further.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? So 0.25 dropped down to 3% OCR, and an indication that there's going to be a further drop. Incidentally, there was a split vote amongst the board of the Reserve Bank. It was 4-2. Two members that were actually suggesting it should be 0.5. Look, I'll tell you what I find interesting about that. It's good that they've done it, and they've indicated it's going to continue. The issue I've got is probably a more fundamental one, and it's about the Reserve Bank itself. If you look at the formation of the Reserve Bank as an independent entity, which I think was 1990, the Independent Reserve Bank Act, and you look at the first two governors of that bank, who were Brash and then Bollard. Pretty much anything the Reserve Bank said in the time of those two governors, which went up till I think about 2012, you could take to the bank, no pun intended. Whatever they said went, and so you could direct your activities in business or other areas of the economy, knowing that what the Reserve Bank was doing was locked in, it was rock solid. That is not true now. It hasn't been probably since the time of Wheeler, and it got worse over Ord's time. So now the Reserve Bank can say something, and you can't plan on it because they can change their mind within a cycle between two OCR increases or drops. So the concern I've got is that institutional wisdom that we had has disappeared. So the fact that you raise that question, Duncan, and say maybe it should have gone further, is an indication of the fact that I think the Reserve Bank themselves actually aren't particularly clear and sure about what it is that they should be doing.
It's interesting you say that. The 4-2 split is the first time in the RB's history that there's been a split vote. I followed that press conference, and Stu, this is the first time. That there backs up Ashley's point. This is significant because you used to be able to bet your house on it. Now you can't bet your business or even your car on it, which is significant for the economy overall.
Yeah, well, they haven't had a panel that makes this decision for very long. But what I would say is, what the hell is wrong with these guys? You know, I heard the acting governor interviewed on the radio, and he said, "Oh, well, you know, the regions are doing." No, they're not. If you're a dairy farmer, you're doing very well, and God bless the dairy sector, right? It's doing brilliantly, and I love the fact that they're one of the most innovative industries in this country, and they're doing brilliantly. Fantastic. But the rest of the country, we're not doing particularly well at all. We've just had Carter Harvey shut down a mill, and they talk about consolidation. If people were building houses, buying timber, they would not be shutting that mill. I mean, you're talking to an old timber guy here. I know how the industry works. The economy is not going well, and the fact that they're signalling already there's going to be a further drop, just make the drop now.
Exactly.
Give us a little bit of fuel into the economy, get things going, but don't come out and say, because the regions are doing well, we thought we'd hold off. The regions are not doing well. There's a certain sector in the regions are doing well. That does not represent regional New Zealand.
Couldn't agree with you more, and it's interesting you say that, because whenever you look at their justifications, Stuart, they're talking about the fact that that inflation's back inside the 1% to 3% band, so they've got a little bit of scope, but they're saying growth stalled, households are under pressure, there's global uncertainty, and so for that reason they're talking about another cut at the next announcement. As you say, if you really believe that, as Key says, and as Shane Jones recently said, do it now, don't wait. And the only reason I can think of why they haven't taken that extra extreme step is because they've learnt, or they would argue they've learnt their lesson from what happened in 2021, where they went too low, and as a result of that, they kicked off an artificial asset boom. But this is different. This is the psychological impact that we are going to have now if this thing's going to get out of the funk that it's in and the economy's going to start moving again.
I wonder, Stu, if they don't actually realise the real economy and how flat it really is. When and I've been in Invercargill this week, and they've got pockets of really good stuff going on, obviously with aquaculture and things, and TY, and they've got dairy, so they're almost a bit isolated from the real economy. But the real economy is dead flat, and they say they'll make 2 more movements before Christmas. Do it now.
Yep.
This smacks of ivory tower sort of thinking, right? And the guys that sit on that board are much smarter than we will ever be, certainly in terms of the depth of knowledge around what drives an economy. And the fact you had a split board, the fact you had 2 people on that board saying do it now, says that if err on the side of growth, okay? If there's any sort of ambiguity or any sort of doubt there or grey area, then err on the side of growth and just bloody well do it, because the cost of money. The lower the cost of money, the more businesses are going to invest. If money is high, they'll short their balance sheet, they're just going to wait. And with global uncertainty, you need to provide a level of certainty in our economy that incentivizes people to invest in jobs and plant and machinery and all those other things that drives jobs and economic growth. It astounds me. It disappoints me. Yeah. And the politicians must be tearing their bloody hair out.
Well, you have this government, and what was their major thing in the budget? Their major point in the budget was that 20% depreciation. There was that move in there, so you could get 20% of your cost of plant back, right? Okay, so it was a bit like a depreciation back. Now, that will only work if people invest. And the Trump stuff came out, the Trump tariff stuff came out just after the budget, which meant no one invested. So you would think that they would do something like this to get investment flowing, Ashley.
Yeah, it's interesting you should say that too, because the Trump tariff thing's being used as a sort of a bogeyman that's sitting over the top of all this stuff. It's been 2 or 3 months now since that, and it doesn't seem to be having the deleterious impact on the economy that we expected it did. So that's not a reason. We, as you say, we need to act now. We need to act hard and fast. We need to act in favour of veering toward growth rather than more of this moribund stagnation that we currently have, and if you find as a result of that things go a little bit quicker than you expected to, then deal with it at that time. Don't try and second guess the economy now. Get on with it and get this thing moving. Because
there's a delay anyway, right, Stu? Because there will be a 6-month delay before yesterday or the other day's impact really kicks in. So you've got delays anyway.
Yeah, but this investment boost that came out in the budget, what they were supposed to do? 1% to GDP over 20 years. I mean, give me a break. One thing that I push really hard for, and Nash and I have talked about this, is accelerated depreciation, 50% up front, 50% over 5 years. Go hard, make a real difference, incentivize people to actually go out and buy that bit of kit. And I remember talking to Sir Peter Talley, with all due respect to a great man. I hope I haven't broken any confidence here, and said, well, what about this? What would you do? He said, if you did that, you would get significant investment and reinvestment in the fishing fleet. These guys know how to run a business. The role of the government in a country the size of 5.5 million people is to create the condition that allows investment. And in the investment boost and what they put in the budget, 1% over 20 years, give me a break, makes no difference. Go hard, go fast, and get this economy cooking with gas.
But it's not just because I agree with you on investment, Stu, but it's not just investment, it's consumption. So there's a consumption issue at the moment because people aren't willing to spend. And I would go as far as saying that right now, and I wouldn't normally recommend this stuff because I'm not a fan of tinkering with artificial controls over the economy, but there is an argument right now for doing something. The problem we've got with the economy, with the government at the moment, is that I think that a lot of people recognize that they're doing all the right stuff in terms of infrastructure and putting the mechanics in place, but it's taking too long. It's not happening quick enough. So it's not just about the stuff you're doing, it's the performative stuff as well. It's the stuff that's actually seen to have an impact. And I'd go as far as saying we should be looking at things like, I don't know, removing GST on a whole class of assets that in order to improve consumption for a set period of time, for 12 months, for 18 months, and then it comes back on. Something which is going to kickstart and it's going to be seen as unusual and a way of a surgical implant into the economy to get people actually spending again, because at the moment, nobody seems to be doing it.
Interesting point that Stu that Nash makes, because I was going to suggest something similar. This is a government that looks like it has no idea what lever to pull, if indeed it has any levers at all. So they've looked at the Reserve Bank this week and said, "Phew, someone's done something," because we look clueless, we are clueless, and we have no idea how to be perhaps thinking outside the square and outside the box. So I think Ashley's right. You've got to do something to jolt, and maybe this is the measure, but it's a pretty minimum measure. The last 12 months have done nothing. They've cut this thing for the last 12 months and nothing's happened.
I agree. I would leave GST alone, but again, I've always been a fan of accelerated depreciation or capital expensing. We don't want to get too technical, but the thing for me though, Duncan, because you've hit the nail on the head, right? You had Nicola come in, a finance minister who I think thought all she had to do was ride this out because the economy was going to recover in 2025. Totally. We talked about this last week. People remember, in 2024, survive until 25 and then thrive. Well, the economy didn't get that message. And as a consequence, you've got a finance minister who's a little bit of a possum in the headlights. You know what I would do if I was Luxon? Because he's getting tarnished with this as well. Yeah. He was the man that ran in New Zealand, therefore knew how to run a country. If I was him, I'd actually get rid of Nicola. I'd put Fish in as Minister of Finance. I'd put Erica in as the Deputy. And he looks strong. I mean, I'm sorry. We've tried Nicola. She's had 2 budgets. She's had her chance. She just hasn't given us anything innovative to grab hold of and show she understands the levers of how to drive an economy forward.
It's funny you say it. I said this 18 months ago about Nicola Willis, and Ashley, you had me on. You said no.
Yeah, well, I still do. I'm not entirely sure that's the problem because I'm a policy wonk, and when I look at policy, the stuff these guys are doing, as I said before, they're doing all the right stuff. Yeah. In terms of putting the economy back on a more fundamental basis, they're doing all the right stuff, but it's the right stuff for 3 to 5 to 10 years, not the right stuff to turn an economy around in 6 to 18 months. And that's the problem. It's the difference between doing the right things to get the economy in the right place in a few years' time versus what do you do right now to get people out and spending again.
Yeah, but actually, you remember this. Duncan, you probably weren't born. So the Longy government, right, they came in at a point in time when the economy was completely smashed. Muldoon was, it was to hell in a handbasket. They made changes within about the first 12 months, which significantly altered our global trajectory. It really, really did. When you find yourself in a crisis, and these guys have met the cost of living crisis, you have a mandate from the public to go really hard and innovative. These guys have not done that, and they had a mandate from the public to do it. Mm.
Yep.
I think on that point, that's interesting you should say that, because I think if you look at the way these guys have performed since 2023, since the election, they have acted like a government that's come in a traditional period 10, 15 years ago, which is talking about small incremental changes over a period of time, rather than a government that was coming in at a crisis period in our history and needed to do something quickly. And I don't think they read the room.
No, I agree. I wonder if it almost looks a bit like that Clark Anderton government that came in and just, remember, they lowered expectations. They had the pledge card. They lowered expectations and did sort of things around the margins. And the economy flowed through. You had that first housing boom 2003, then another one 2010-12. So you saw those 2 big cycles, and when housing was booming, the economy was booming, all the associated enterprise was going on. This government, I don't know if it knows what levers to pull. Are there levers to pull? Because it was very different to 1984 when Longy came in, because there was a closed economy,
There are levers to pull. And again, I don't mean to sound like a crack record here, but our depreciation rules are 30 years old. Our depreciation rules, again, for the listeners who don't understand this, what happens is if you buy a bit of machinery to drive productivity, you're allowed to write that off over time. And our rules in this country mean you write it off for its physical life, not its economic life.
Yeah.
Now, most of the countries we compare ourselves against allow you to write a piece of kit off over its economic life, and therefore it allows you to invest in a way that drives productivity. We don't do that. The cost of capital here, and by that I mean the cost of borrowing money for businesses, is so expensive here. It is people go, oh, yeah, it's really easy to do business here. It's easy to open a business here. It's hard to do business here, and it's even harder to grow an innovative business in New Zealand. That's the role the government has to play, and these guys they're missing in action. They really are.
I come back to my point, though, Stu. I agree with you completely, but that's not going to excite the masses on the consumer side, and we need a consumer boom now.
Yeah, okay. So people aren't earning enough as well. There's an issue around our level of wages, but just on Luxon, because this impacts Luxon. He's the head of this whole thing. This impacts him, and there's no wonder his poll ratings are low because the real world is struggling in New Zealand, right? Now, if he had a plan with his economic growth approach in 2025, I think it may have worked. Except he went out there and did social media and said we're going to do this, and then sat back and waited for it to happen. It didn't happen. What about a cut to business tax? Our business tax is some of the highest in the modern and developed world. We sit out there with Argentina and some of the South American countries. It's appalling. These other countries like Ireland have moved in this area over 20 years. We don't have any plan around growth. We just hope it happens.
Stu talked before about the Rogernomics era, and one of the interesting things about that era is that they did some pretty innovative stuff in order to make it more easy to conduct business. And one of the things that happened over that time, and I think it's happened several times since, is all of the established wisdom and IRD reports on this stuff is that when you lower business tax, it actually increases taxation gathering over a period of time because businesses prosper and they pay more tax because they're doing better. So all of the established wisdom tells us that this is the time to do it. This is the time to say, okay, how can we be more competitive against the economies with which we compete? How can we make it easier for our exporters to produce the goods that they do and sell them offshore? Here's a way to do that. And there doesn't seem to be any of that sort of innovation. It's all this sort of careful, and don't get me wrong, I get the careful stuff, but it's all this careful incremental stuff that's not going to make any fundamental change.
And actually, you know what, mate, you're 100% right. Also, you lower it to a level where it becomes too expensive to try and minimize your tax, so you just pay it anyway. The other thing also, and this is not many people have gotten onto this. So Nicola is the Minister of Finance. She's also the Minister of Economic Growth. You have concentrated two of them. I don't know if they call it economic growth or economic development, but in essence, she is the minister that holds the two major portfolios responsible for economic development and finance. It's too much work for one person. But the other thing that happens, because I was economic development when Grant was finance, I was also revenue when Grant was finance, and you get two different ideas coming in. And Grant and I had some fantastic conversations, very robust about what we should be doing. He bought one, he bought the conservative fiscal side, which he had to do. I bought the sort of innovative, this is what we need to do to drive it forward. And my God, we came up with some really good ideas. But you concentrating both those portfolios in one person is just too much work. You don't get diversity of thought. You overload someone. And when it's someone like Nicola,
it's interesting, actually. There's not many people linking themselves to Grant Robertson these days. I think this might be the first guy we've seen linking themselves to Grant Robertson and his ideas. There we go, Stu, you're guilty.
Well, at least he had a plan, whether you like it or not. The other thing, though, is, like I said, Luxon has to show some leadership. He's in real trouble. I think he's in trouble at the moment. Not within his corpus, but so get rid of Nicola, put Bishop in there, and that'll buy him time.
Good on you for having an idea. Stu, actually, I just want to talk about Shane Jones. Stu, about Shane Jones.
Yeah.
They have an idea. It's called Fast Track, right? So they've actually gone out there and tried to fundamentally change the system and how you get industry going again. So good on Shane for that. That's going to change. Jones has indicated to me this week that they're going to have to refine and readdress the fast track legislation because it's not quite working how they want it to. They've had one project fast tracked. The rest of them will come online next year, almost too late. So that's a good move. Something's going to happen there.
Oh, well, it isn't. It's interesting because he's particularly focused on energy at the moment. And so he's talking about reactivating our use of coal. And his argument is, and it's really hard to disagree with him on this stuff, his argument is that coal's going to continue to be necessary in this country for the next 20, 30 to 40 years, and that if we ignore that and we go down this ideological track of around emissions, etc., then it's only going to get worse for us economically. And I think he's got a point. And so the political side of that is that he's separating himself. This is clever stuff. He's separating New Zealand First out from ACT and National. He's putting a clear path. He's weaponizing basically energy in a way that I think is going to resonate with pragmatists in the New Zealand electorate. And he's basically creating that fissure in a way I think that's going to be a political issue in a way that probably wouldn't have been had he not made that speech that he did last week. But I completely agree with him. The current emissions targets, I think we've got to meet by 2050, Stu. If we go down the track that Jones is suggesting, that may be pushed back a little bit further. But if it's in the interest of keeping our country going economically and meeting our energy needs over the next 20 or 30 years until we replace it with something more sustainable, difficult to argue.
He needs help. He needs Stu in there. I mean, I think Jones needs a partner in crime, and Stuart's got to be something. You are a supporter of industry. You believe in jobs. You believe in regional jobs. You believe in mining.
I do, absolutely. I mean, look, Ashley and I were talking about this. You know, there are two different. I'm going to generalise here, mate. There are two different types of politicians. There are the ideologues, and then there are practicals. Right now, you've got to have some ideals. There's no doubt about that to even get into politics. To believe you can, but the thing is the politics of pragmatism at this point in time need to rule, because the politics of ideology means you don't do what is necessary to drive an economy forward. And the thing about Jones is he's going around and he's talking the language of the common man, the common woman who wants to work, who works hard. You know, these are the men and women who are up 6 days a week. They coach their kids rugby. They have a beer or a wine down at the rugby club rooms. They go to book clubs. They're the good, hard-working Kiwis who want to see our country do well. And when someone comes out and says we're not mining down there or we're not doing this because there's a lizard, they go, what? Yeah. What is going on with this country? Oh. So he is talking, but the other thing is the great irony here, Dunk. The great irony is that Labor was formed in Blackpool in a mining town with a whole lot of miners who cared about you do a fair day's pay for a fair day's work, and now Labor's trying to stop the mining, and Jones is down there talking the language of the working man.
I was on a plane. I was on a plane to Invercargill on Wednesday. It was an A320 Airbus. Okay, so it's a jet. It's a big plane, and it had 2 spare seats on it. The rest of it was full. And on this plane, there were a number of older people who'd been returning from the Pacific Islands on holidays, the Invercargill people. A number of people coming out of Auckland and the Waikato who were in high-vis vests and overalls and workmen's clothes. They were heading to the coal mines and to Tiwai to be. They were servicing. They were part of that industry. And a couple of people going on holiday in Invercargill for the first time because they wanted to go there rather than Australia to have a look. So and it was full. And these people, I spoke to a couple of the guys in the high-vis vests. They were there for a couple of days, coming from the Waikato. They did all sorts of stuff in industry. And so that place is pumping. But those guys were laughing at Labor and the Greens and the Māori Party. They brought it up themselves to me because they just do not hear that language. They do not understand the opposition to their jobs. Their jobs. One of them was an Aussie guy, married to a Waikato woman, living in New Zealand, and they're going to go back to Australia because this country's stuffed, he said. Ashley.
Yeah. Coal is the most plentiful energy source on the planet by a country mile. So it's plentiful and it's cheap. If you're not using it, you're a fool.
And Ashley, look, I think we all agree in an ideal world, we wouldn't burn coal. In an ideal world, everything would be renewable. But this is not an ideal world. This is why we talk about the politics and pragmatism. Let us do what is necessary to drive industry forward, to get our economy going, to get jobs, and then when everything's all dandy like that, let's deal with the other issues.
Yeah, I agree.
So it's a really important issue we've got to deal with at the moment, and Jones seems to be the only one coming up with solutions.
Fonterra this week has, actually you picked up on this, and good point, they've sold their shop front, effectively, their marketing and sales arm, their commercial arm. You tell us what's happened. It's almost $4 billion sale to the French.
Yeah, really interesting story. So to be fair, this was signalled a while back. So this is just the announcement that the deal's been done. So Fonterra have sold 2 of their iconic brands, Mainland and Anchor, to a French company called Lactatel, I think, who are obviously, by virtue of that name, involved in milk products as well. And so the deal includes that Fonterra will continue to provide milk for the product that Lactatel produces. But they've done this deal, and I think the deal is about $3.84 billion, which is well above market expectations. And it's on the back of another sale about 2 years ago of Tip Top, which Fonterra first acquired in 2001 and owned up until about 2023, 2022, I think. So, I'm sort of of 2 minds about this. On the one hand, there'll be people who will lament the fact that we've lost these iconic brands, these great brands that were, embedded in the culture of New Zealand and part of who we are as a people. The flip side of that is that, Fonterra will have the opportunity in the future, if it chooses to buy other iconic brands or buy these brands back or whatever. So I think this is probably a smart move. I'm not sure what's happening with the capital. I don't know whether it's being paid out to the shareholders, who are essentially farmers, as a dividend or reinvested in some other way. But I'm prepared to have confidence that the Fonterra board have got some understanding of what they're doing and doing it for the right reasons.
I think I read, Ashley and Stu, Stu, that it's $2 a share. And it may well be a payout. Yes. Now, that's a lot of money to head back into the regions, isn't it?
Yeah, like I completely agree with Ashley. And I know Miles. He's a very, very smart man. And I think, there's no way I'm going to second guess the strategy. But what I would like to see is not this money not paid out as a dividend. I'd like to see Fonterra reinvest this in a way that drives productivity and enhances, efficiency and puts Fonterra once again back at the very top of the global dairy industry. Very smart man is Miles. It's you gotta know that he's got a strategy and he's following it.
Yeah, is it an asset sale? I mean, I know it's a private, it's a listed company, but is it?
Well, yes, it is, but that's an emotive term. It's interesting, just as a bit of a sideline, because there's always this debate in New Zealand when government sells assets and the sort of angst and hand-wringing. I think I talked last week, and I'll use it again as an example. TVNZ in 2004 was worth over $1 billion. It owned 25% of Sky TV, and government didn't sell it, which that was probably the right time to do so when digitisation was becoming an issue. And what's happened over the next 20 odd years, it's dropped, probably worth 80 million now, if not less. And, we have this angst and this hang-ring. We're selling off the family jewels. Look, if you're that worried about the family jewels, put it into the hands of the New Zealand Super Fund and let them buy and sell as necessary. Because at the end of the day, if it's about the value, then buy high-value assets, buy NVIDIA shares, buy Microsoft shares, buy something that's actually going to produce, not these dog assets that this country's owned over the last 20 or 30 years, that because we've got this obsession with owning them, decrease in value to the point where they're worthless. It's just stupid. And as far as I'm concerned, for the people that believe in this economic sovereignty over assets, they're economically illiterate.
Okay, lads, I thought we had a Dennis Conner moment there where Stuart had enough and he'd walked off from the panel. I thought it was brilliant. I was going to market this as Nash walks out in a political panel, but no.
I did that with Hosking. Didn't mean that really.
Hey,
I had to plug my computer in. Sorry, guys.
I wonder if that was Nicola Willis ringing to tell you to get stuffed. But yeah. Hey, we'll leave it there, guys. Always appreciate your time. Brilliantly said today. I thought it was really good analysis, really smart. So thank you so much.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.
Okay. Wow. Stu Nash. Get rid of Nicola Willis. That'll send a few shockwaves through the beehive. Anyway, lead us to the editor. Duncan Garner with a D. You're doing as much as you can to get rid of Chris Luxon, writes this listener. I wish you would just shut up once and for all. He, as far as I'm concerned, he's one of the best Prime Ministers I have ever seen. Your precious Labour left them with no money. If you have no money, how do you use no money to spend? If you are so smart, tell us what you would spend the money on that you haven't got. The Reserve Bank isn't bringing interest rates down. The banks are still at 4.79 fixed. 3% plus 1.5% should be 4.5% fixed. Useless Labour has no plans. You seem to think, Duncan, Labour, Greens and Māori would be better. God help us all. All you do is go on and on about Chris Luxon. It is getting very boring. No one I know thinks Chris Luxon is useless like you're doing. You're as bad as Radio New Zealand and TVNZ. I don't even watch them. They are so negative. And now I'm not going to listen to you, as you are also as negative as they are. Well, thank you for your feedback. You won't be listening or watching to this, but I appreciate you getting back to me. Thank you very much for listening like you did until now. That is us, folks. Daffodil Day is next Friday, so make sure you do give generously. Thanks for your feedback and support. Get in touch through our social media at Duncan Garner Podcast, TikTok, Instagram, or flick us an email, duncan@rover.nz to my team. Brody, thank you, sir. You're doing a great job. And we'll do it all again, of course, next time we're on. And to remember, life's no dress rehearsal. There is no curtain raiser. This is it. We live in one of the best places on earth. So get out and enjoy what we've got. Have a great rest of the day and evening and weekend. Take care, folks. Ta-da.
Editor-in-Chief with Duncan Garner.